later. Okay, awesome. With that, I'll turn it over to Sarah and Josh.
Thank you, Kelsey. Okay, so as Kelsey mentioned, we had a very unique year last year, and let me turn this on to share my screen. Maybe try this one more time. Well, that did not work. We had a great night Friday night. Our fair starts on Thursday and ends on Monday officially. And on Thursday night we had Stony LaRue put on a great concert. And the following morning at 6 o'clock, we were awakened by 80 to 100-mile-an-hour winds with no warning, and it brought extreme damage to our fairgrounds. We have a lot of trees in our fairgrounds, and let's see here. I think I can do it now. Okay, so here's Casey Donahue or Stony LaRue, and that was a good night. The next morning, this is what we were presented with. No warning, and in about 20 minutes, we had some pretty significant weather occur. So, as Kelsey mentioned, I have around 20 years of experience, both volunteer and career fire. So risk management, incident command system, I was the one for the job that day, because the incident command system just kind of fell into place. We put it in place and we worked pretty efficiently to manage the incident as it evolved. In this picture specifically, this is one of our 4-H families campers. And
Josh, it
yes,
didn't pop to your next picture. It's still showing Stony LaRue.
that better?
Nope.
No? Well, I don't, is it changing at all?
No, it's not.
What about now?
Nope.
Hmm.
You know what? Just keep talking and I
Yeah.
will pull up my pictures from the fair.
Okay, super. So the trees, of course, looking at any incident, your top priority is life safety. So those families that there was several families trapped in their camper. They either their family or a neighboring camper called 911. The fire department, EMS, police department responded, and they were addressing the life safety issues. At the end of the day, there were no significant injuries. Very minor injuries occurred, and we thank the Lord for that, because our fair, we were able to get it turned around pretty remarkably throughout the day, and made things work rather well. It would have been a whole different mood had there been significant injuries or loss of life. So there's several fair board members that are involved in public safety, whether it be volunteer fire or career fire or EMS. And so as the president of the fair board, I was kind of the incident commander in our realm. And so I knew those people, knowing those people's capabilities, the resources that they had personally, assigning them to various search uh, or logistics, or just being a liaison to the various organizations that were down there responding. Tactically, well, I guess you could say strategically, the best thing that saved our fair is that I called 3 different tree cutting outfits just as soon as I got in my truck, and because I was camping as well. As soon as I got in my truck and did a quick size up, we got 3 different tree companies on the way. And mind you, Winfield in the greater area experienced the same damage throughout town. So we were able to get them to the fairgrounds before they had to go in town, and that's what a lot of what saved our fair. Um, had had we not gotten them to the fairgrounds when we did, we wouldn't have probably not seen them until way late in the day. Our fair, our fairgrounds are owned by the city of Winfield, and so um, just as soon as I called those 3 outfits, I made contact with our city manager and said, "Hey, by the way, uh, they're on their way here." And he's like, "Okay, I'll come down and meet with you." So he had the whole city to take care of, and that's where the incident command system really comes into play. Is that throughout the entire fair scenario, he only had to worry about contacting me and me contacting him in that regard, because he had his utilities, he had mutual aid utilities, tree companies. I mean, he had the incident command system enacted as well, to where he wasn't talking to 15 people. He had 5 to 10 that were coming to him with the information. So kind of looking at risk management, there's 2 ways to kind of break risk management down in my head, and that is being proactive versus reactive. There are certain steps that we take that we try to be proactive with, but no matter how well you prepare and how much you plan, how much time you spend on an emergency action plan, until it falls in your lap and you're dealt with a significant event like we were dealt, you just kind of got to kind of go with the flow and set the course on how things are going to play out. So I want to talk about the reactive part. I mentioned the incident command structure. if if you're in a administrative role, um, whether it be for extension or for the county fair, and I know that there's different interoperability throughout the state between 4-H extension and the fair. And in Cali County, we we have historically, and still to this day, have a great relationship between the fair and extension. You know, 4-H, Sarah was great that day because we had communications going. We had a brief face to face. We identified the priorities of what we needed to do. Talked about animal health, made sure that our animals were okay, our families were okay, and then what do we need to do to keep things rolling? Because scheduled for 8 o'clock that morning was our swine show, and we had no power in the fairgrounds, which meant no sound system. We had no lights in the show arena. Our bedding was strewn throughout the entire fairground. So there was quite a few things that we needed to address to still let those exhibitors proceed with their show in somewhat of a timely manner. So, and I know that by nature, 4-H is set up in the same way as incident command. Sarah and the other agent, they're up there. They've got their superintendents for each of the departments, and then their exhibitors and families below them. So they have that same communication structure. So having somewhat of a idea or understanding of how the incident command structure works will help you in the event you're dealt with the same scenario. Next thing is figuring out priorities. As the fair, I didn't really necessarily, life safety wasn't, it is a priority, but life safety isn't something that the fair is going to address. We're going to aid, we help search, we help get around to all of the campers. But as far as rendering aid for that life safety, that's not something that our volunteers are expected to do. So figuring out that priorities, and that was a question that I asked myself out loud as I'm driving around the fairgrounds. Okay, Josh, what are your priorities on responding to this incident? And just getting those in my head to where, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it, getting a plan in place, and then following through with those priorities, and then making sure that your staff that are assisting you are accountable for what they're supposed to be doing and following through with the instructions that you provided. So as a general rule, with the incident command structure, if you're not familiar with it, especially in a centralized command, anything in this scenario, anything that to do with the fair that needed to go to the city went through me. And that way, and we had city employees that are on the fair board that have phone numbers for linemen, have phone numbers to the city manager, the director of public works, etc. And I had to kind of rein them in to make them understand that it needed to go through me as the incident commander per se, so that I was in the know of what needed to happen, but then also for me to kind of prioritize things. We wanted power, but we also understood that the hospital needed power, the grocery stores needed power, the nursing homes needed power. Most of Winfield's grid was knocked out for some period of time. So just educating your volunteers, your people around you, the people that are going to be involved in a scenario like this, to make sure that the flow of information goes through those proper channels, just helps the entire incident or issue evolve. So that's kind of the reactive side. On the proactive side, okay, so we take this incident, unofficial vote, most significant issue to occur at a county fair in Cali County to date that we know of. Second most critical issue occurred nearly 20 years to the date previous, and that was where we had 11 head of sheep and goats become electrocuted during the fair. One of the animals was able to chew on a drop cord, and that drop cord came in contact with the metal pins, and then that electricity flowed through those animals and killed them before it tripped the breaker. Pretty significant event. We learned from that. All of our electric drops now have GFI receptacles on them. We also require ground plugs on all of the exhibitors' fans so that ground fault will function properly. And then just trying to be mindful of what risks may present themselves in scenarios like that, where if something doesn't get plugged in properly, or if somebody isn't mindful of that, because that was a generation of showers, 2 generations of showers ago that occurred, and they don't remember the catastrophic events of that incident. So making sure that people remember issues like that, knowing that the rules are in place for a reason, will also help mitigate that risk to be proactive in that scenario. Our fair, we kind of have a multitude of things that occur within our fair. We have, of course, the 4-H, the open class is kind of in that same realm, where we have exhibitors, hobbies and clothing, etc. But then we also have grandstand events that range from ATV rodeo, concert, beer garden, figure 8 race, rodeo, And then we also have a carnival and food court. So there's a lot of things that come into play with, okay, with 4-H comes the biohazards, the things that have been talked about, the diseases of animals coming in, being in close proximity to each other. And Sarah's going to elaborate on that, some of the things that we have in place there. But then you also have a group scenario, a group gathering, a large public attendance. What if there's an active killer situation? What if somebody drives through our midway? There's weather events, tornado, lightning. We have a 5,000 capacity grandstand that's aluminum mostly. If that takes a lightning strike, we could have a significant mass casualty incident that occurs there. But then you have the interaction of animals to food to rides, and we all learn from COVID the ability for germs to migrate quickly. So one of the things that we kind of did several years ago, we implemented hand washing stations throughout the midway. So that's one way that we mitigate risk. There's 10 or 12 of those hand wash stations placed throughout the food court outside of all the animal barns so that we can promote the hand washing before hands come in contact with food, so that there's one less thing that or there's a lower risk there of a hazard. Signage, we follow the IFE, the International Association of Fairs and Expos recommendations on signage throughout all of our fairgrounds, whether it be for crowds or for smoking or for, animals are here, be mindful of them, etc. But then also insurance. We pay a pretty healthy insurance bill with all the things that we have going. Our carnival carries their own insurance, but we also have to make sure that we're covered for animal issues that may arise, or our spectators when it comes to the motorized events or even the rodeo events. Those are things that come into place. And there's a there's a whole nother rabbit hole on insurance and you can insure, you can spend a lot of time talking about insurance, but the main thing that we focus on is making sure that our vendors are all insured. Even food vendors, if it goes on or in the body, they have to carry insurance to be at our fair. We have to be named as an additional insured and require those certificates prior to granting them access to being a vendor. And then, like our big line items, our general liability, we have to include the city of Winfield since they own the facility as additional insured. So it helps if you have an insurance agent that's willing to help with your fair. We have an insurance committee, and they spend they're not on very many other committees because it's quite the undertaking to get all the insurance that's required for our fair. So with insurance, make sure that you're covered there. Again, on the proactive approach, emergency action plans, have some sort of a plan, whether it's written or written is best, just some sort of a blueprint or a guide to go off of, so that you have something to revert back to. Oftentimes that's just a suggestion. And most of the time in Kansas, your emergency management for the county is going to be a good contact. And I tell you, getting those relationships formed ahead of an incident is beneficial. I know that, I was in contact with our emergency manager, and the things that we needed to happened rather quickly because we had not necessarily planned for an incident like this, but we just had those communication channels open. And then again, it kind of goes back to that incident command structure of having some sort of a training for your volunteers so that they understand if in the event an incident occurs of whatever degree, whether it be environmental or terrorists or a bio emergency, that we know the channels to follow and the way to respond to that incident, to that risk, so that things go easier. And, it can be a short, quick, down and dirty, like the morning of, as we got gathered up and people started coming in, you know, I gave them a brief rundown of the incident command system, you know, and broke it up into groups to where I had a campground. I had one person tasked to a campground, another person tasked to another campground. I had one person tasked to the midway. One person was um, was on vehicle, assessing vehicles, because we kind of wanted to keep an account of how many vehicles were damaged and the degree of damage, just so that if we had that documented. So getting those people in the right place again is helpful in an incident like this. So again, training, having a plan, and then just trying to be proactive as you can before an incident, so that when an incident does occur, that you're ready. So I'll let Sarah kind of take it from there and fill in on some of the 4-H stuff, and then her kind of mindset and thoughts from last year's fair.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Yeah, so we're very blessed to have Josh as our fair board president. Is very helpful to have somebody that has that type of training, especially in these circumstances. So that morning, kind of to give a little more perspective of it, right behind my camper, or right to the side of my camper, there was a tree that fell on a trailer, and they pulled a family out. I said, not me, they pulled a family out of a hole, and the tree fell like this close to one of the 4-H members' head. And so there was a lot going on that morning. Like you said, it hit us out of the blue and out of nowhere at 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. with no warning. So kind of my goal coming through it was, okay, we need to make sure everyone's safe, make sure animals are safe. But then also, how can we salvage, once we knew that was okay, it's how can we salvage this fair? Because it's either everybody load up and leave and we all have a really bad taste of what 2023's fair looks like, or how can we communicate well and call people and work our way through it and salvage that fair. It was expected for another round of those storms to come that night, and they were expecting them to be even harder than that morning. And so that was something else that we had in our minds as we were working through it, is what's tonight gonna bring. Luckily it didn't come through that hard. But as far as on the 4-H side, we had chicken coops thrown across the pigs. We had, like you said, bedding, everything gone. So that's just another spot, is making sure that you have correct ID on every animal that's on that property. I'm going to be honest, with our fair in the last handful of years, we've gotten kind of relaxed on leg bands for county fair birds, and after this year, every single bird will have a leg band, because somebody's like, Leroy's gone. Well, I don't know what Leroy looks like, and I don't know a tag number for him because he was a chicken without a leg band. And so just definitely puts in place those things of, we absolutely have to, even on those small species that you don't think about much, it's not a big drama species, we have to have identification on them, because you never know what you're going to wake up to. Um, we 1 second, sorry. Um, but with that bigger one coming in that night, we have animals there that have already shown. It was Saturday morning, so we've already shown goats, cattle, sheep. We've got hogs getting ready to show. Actually, our judge showed up right after it, and he had driven a couple hours. And so, how can we get the hog show going, but yet give those families time? But we do not have electricity, so it's always really good to have a battery powered mic, because once we kind of got things rolling after we went and met with Josh, met with the group, and kind of put a game plan of what we were doing, once we felt we were comfortable, we went ahead and did the best we could. We gave kind of an hour notice and we got started on the hog show, even though we had no electricity. Our barns luckily are open sided, so we had a little bit of light. But we're able to have that battery powered mic to get things going. And then as we went on throughout the day, the electricity went on. So one thing I would say is take a breath and breathe. You know, everybody else is freaking out. Try not to freak out and fake it if you can until it's over. Because there's nothing, you know, you're the one that those families are looking to. And if you are freaking out, hyperventilating, and not handling it well, they will not trust you in that spot and they will too. And so be confident and just act like you got a plan and communicate with everybody, and it'll kind of calm everybody else down too. Another thing I would say is make sure you know those families, especially if you're in a smaller community even, but know those families that are EMS trained. I'm lucky I have a background with my family in it as well, so I do kind of know some of those contacts in my county. But know those families that are 4-H families or showing families that have that sort of training, so when this does happen, you have some people you can contact different families in your 4-H area that you can put on a task, and they have that training and kind of know a little bit too. Just it gives you more people to pull in to assist you. Um, we kind of changed, we moved on the fly and made the best calls that we thought we could make at that point. With harder storms coming in, we already had some animals show. We did go ahead and allow breeding females to leave. If they were a market animal, they had to stay. But I know some families in those barns that have multi-thousand-dollar replacement animals, and I did not want to hold them hostage if we had even harder storms coming that night. The last thing I wanted to do is hold this animal hostage and something happened to it that night. So those were just kind of decisions we made on the fly and tried to do the best we could to keep people and animals safe, but yet still try and stay on the same finish point to get to have a successful fair. And we were able to get it cleaned up. And by the end of the fair, we all remembered it happened, obviously, but we still ended a pretty normal fair by the end of it. I think a little bit of other risk management, just like biosecurity stuff for check-ins, but also in your taggings. We're all in tagging stuff right now. Just trying to be mindful of biosecurity. If you're tagging hogs, there's lots of other things. It doesn't have to be a windstorm at 6 a.m. But just looking at those biosecurity stuff, having a vet check coming into the fair. But so that was really quick, but I do want to leave just a little bit time for questions. I know we've got 5 or so minutes.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah and Josh. At this point, looks like maybe now you can see some of the damage that we dealt with at our fair this last year. But if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can also unmute. I don't know that Cali County is unique in experiencing several issues over my time involved with that fair. I think probably everybody has had their points. But if you all have any questions, some of our best planning comes from learning from previous things that happened. So with that, we'll open it up to questions about risk management or about this incident.
One comment to make. I know before our fair last year, our emergency manager had alerted me to this and signed me up, but your nearest National Weather Service office, you can tell them you have an event coming and what days, and they will put you on the list. And if you have any weather coming towards you, they will call you. You have to have a 24-hour contact number for them. And they will also give you daily kind of weather updates if any rain or storms are expected. So gets a little annoying at times when you get your daily update when you're in the middle of the show ring. But it was nice when we had Storm move in on our auction night and we were getting reports half hour to an hour before of lightning and hail coming in. So it's worth the little bit of annoyance on occasion.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, in Cali County, we've dealt with electrocuted sheep. We've dealt with floods. We've dealt with multiple floods, this kind of storm, and just about anything. Heat, which everyone deals with heat at their fair. I want to reiterate what Josh mentioned about thinking about electrical. You know, oftentimes for risk management, we're thinking about weather-related incidences. That issue with the sheep caused a lot of people to be very wary for a long time, and so the fair board does have in our fair rules that no metal can be touching metal, and you must use a grounded plug for any of your fans. And Extension does a good job of letting 4-H members know that in advance. We're in a spot where for sure our sheep and goats need fans, and kind of those box fans typically work the best, but those are not the safest. And so families do have to go out and look for the appropriate fans, because the big hanging fans that we use for cattle don't really work in that sheep and goat and hog barn. So the rule is the grounded plug, no metal touching metal, and it has seemed to work pretty well. But I would encourage you to be thinking in advance what needs to be communicated to your families. And when you do that, don't just communicate the rule. Sometimes it's important to have that reason behind the rule as well. We have just a couple minutes left before they kick us back into the main room. Y'all are a quieter group than we were the other night with showmanship and round robin.
Just speaking from experience with our county fair last year, one other emergency you guys want to make sure you plan for is missing children. We had a kid disappear for about 45 minutes last year. We found her. She was taking a nap under the counter in our concession stand, but make sure you have, these are the steps we're going to take in this order, and you know which people you're going to call on to help look for a kid when you find yourself in that situation, because it is not fun.
One other thing that I think is great that Cali County does, and maybe most counties do this, there is a mobile command center with our emergency personnel located on the fairgrounds during this event. And so if there's any possible way that you can have that, I think that that would be helpful as well. Thank you, Grace, for those comments also. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Maybe just to fill a little bit of time here. So whenever we're tagging some different things that we've kind of have ready for this year is different kind of tubs so you can step your feet in, because if you think, when we're tagging, we're going in trailers where we've got sheep and goats all around each other. These families are just getting ready to have either gotten their goats and sheep or animals, or they're just getting ready to go to a lot of spring shows and just helping fight that fungus early on. Just be as clean as possible. It's a lot going on when we're tagging. but just being as clean as possible with it. There's different things called tech draw spray. There's lots of different products to use to help because you're using the same ear tags on every animal, and so just watching that.
Okay, it looks like the breakout room is closing, so feel free to go ahead and leave the breakout room and you'll be asked to join another one in a few minutes.